Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
Everyone your grandpa and your great-grandpa had a crush on dated Burgess Meredith. Burgess Meredith! Who is Burgess Meredith? This from Rocky, The Twilight Zone, Grumpy Old Men, and the freaking Penguin. I say this with no shade, but with pure admiration. But who did he date, Jen? I'm so glad you asked. I'm so glad to share this. Nichelle Nichols, Marlena Dietrich, Hedy freaking Lamar, Palika Dar, Ingrid freaking Bergman, Rosalind Russell, two-time Oscar winner Olivia de Havilland, Miss MGM Norma Shearer, and Tallulah Bankhead. I guess to the silent generation, he was their Pete Davidson.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
I feel like nobody's talking about the systemic plot in America that disproportionately affects the Black population here in the United States. It's one of those things that if you're close to the communities that are affected, you would really understand. But if you're not, it's something that kind of just goes behind the scenes, and you don't really hear about it much. So studies show that 90% of the lowest grade quality of glycine is marketed and imported into Black communities in the United States of America. And one of the reasons why I truly believe that the government is trying to block TikTok is to make sure that the Black community never figures out about Don Juan Geelong's high quality food grade and industrial grade glycine. And it's a shame because that can change communities forever if we just had that information.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
Did you know that if you have like a grove of oak trees or a grove of some specific single kind of tree growing somewhere, and you take a different kind of tree and you go in there and you plant that little different kind of tree sapling, the grove of adult trees will do something with the mycelium, something with their roots. They'll basically kill that tree because they don't want another baby tree taking the nutrition and all the good stuff from their own baby saplings. Like if there's a grove of oak trees and there's some baby oak tree saplings and they're red oaks and you try to put a little white oak in there, they're going to be like, nope, that bitch is dead, because they don't want an outsider taking nutrients and taking resources away from their babies. Trees are, trees play the long game of fuck around and find out.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
Okay, did you know that Upper Paleolithic art dating back over 30,000 years depicts people using artificial pickles on themselves and each other, which means that mankind invented spicy toys before they invented the wheel. Getting off was literally more important than getting around. And I just love that for us.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
Okay, but only because you asked. Christians are dead set against things like witchcraft and astrology, but this last Sunday they celebrated the literal resurrection of a dead guy on the first Sunday after the first full moon of an equinox. And then they hold rituals where they actually believe they turn wine and bread into the body and blood of what's essentially a zombie. And then they chant, and then they have animal sacrifices they then eat. I think in general, Christians just need to be a lot more honest about how much of their religion was ripped off from paganism. And that's just Easter. Don't even get me started on Christmas. We don't have that much time.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
Okay, I'm going to say the weird thing. And this may fuck some people up, okay? I was a correctional officer for 20 plus years, okay? And kind of fluctuated all over the jail, but in this particular case, I was working in the receiving room. So the receiving room at the prisons is where you receive the inmates that's coming in that's going to be detained. So within that unit, you don't know what you're receiving from off the streets. You can be receiving people who's dealing with drug and alcohol issues. You could be receiving people who's dealing with serious medical issues. You can be dealing with people who is dealing with serious psychiatric issues. And in this particular case, I was dealing with somebody who had severe psychiatric issues. So now, with that, in the receiving room, you have a group of doctors, nurses, psychiatrists that are there to assess the inmate before the inmate is then transferred to their housing area. Okay. So now on this particular day, I was an officer in the receiving room and I had to do tours. Now, tours are when you just kind of like walk around and you check the cells and, you make sure that the inmates is, okay, you make sure they eat, stuff like that, but you're always extremely busy. Like you can never just keep your focus on what you're doing because you always is ordered to do something else. Okay. So now with this particular day, I was doing a tour and it had to been, I'm going to say at least, it was a lot of inmates in the receiving room that day. But this inmate in particular, they put him by himself because he was having some, psychotic episodes. So I was doing a tour and I'm telling you, this is one of the first things that fucked my mind up, okay? Because a lot of correctional officers leave with mental issues because we don't get debriefed and we take these issues outside the jail with us when we retire or whatever. But anyway, back to the story. I was doing a tour and I got in front of the cell and I was like looking down. I was looking down and I was like, ooh, what is that? Now the prison have a serious rodent issues. Most prisons have rodent issues, okay? So I'm doing a tour and I'm like, what is that? Now in my mind, I'm thinking it's a baby mouse. You understand? I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm like, because it was grayish in color. It was definitely like flesh or something. So, it disgusts me, but I'm still looking and I'm touring and I'm coming back and I'm touring and I'm, so it just looks strange. So I decided to take a further look. So I'm bending down and I'm looking at the flesh and I was like, oh, that looks strange. So that made me open the cell because the flesh was directly, or the baby mouse in my mind, was directly in front of the cell. So, I opened the cell. And when I opened the cell, the guy that was in there, he was going like his eyes was like this. Like if you put your hand in front of it, it was just nothing there. It was nothing in the head. It was nothing. It was like, okay. So, but what I realized what he was doing, he had his foot in front of his face. And it's crazy because I should have noticed the foot first, but the eyes scared me so bad because it's like nothing was there. It was like, so his foot was directly in front of him. And at this point, he was working on toe number 3. He had something wrapped around his toe and he was choking his toe. He was choking the toe. And at this point, he had removed the flesh off the first big toe. Then he removed the flesh off the second toe. He was working on the third toe. But what he was doing was, he was sticking. When he took the flesh off the toes, he was pushing them up underneath the door. So when I realized what was going on, of course, I screamed for a supervisor. And when the supervisor came in, like we were all horrified, like what the fuck is going on? Like we never seen no shit like this, okay? So now my supervisor ordered me to collect the toes, the flesh. So I had to then pick up the flesh of these toes. And we didn't know what to do. Like they had to pretty much tell me what all to do with these toes before I collected them. I had to, no. I had to collect the toes first. I had to put on gloves and I had to pick those toes up and I had to take them to medical, and then I had to tell medical what was going on. And it was like, you got toes in your hand? And I'm like, I have flesh. These are toes. So I can't remember really what happened, like if they put them in milk or they put them in water with ice. I know they didn't put them in water with ice. I think they put them in with milk because they did something wrong where the toes wasn't able to be saved. But I was just following the orders of the medical staff on how to reserve these toes because, of course, the inmate had to go out 911. Like, we had to take him out. It was just blood. The way when I toured, he was sitting so close to the door, I seen his head sitting up. So it was like, okay, well, if his head is sitting up, he's still alive and he's breathing. I had no clue with this man, like the way he was so close to the door, you couldn't see his feet in front of his face, or if he was bending down at first and choking the toes out, and like he self-mutilated. He self-mutilated, and it blew my mind. So, of course, we had to take him out 911. I was the receiving room officer, but that title can change at any time depending on what's going on in the prison. So now I had to become the medical officer, who is now transporting the inmate out of the receiving room and taking him straight to the emergency room so he can get the treatment that he needed for his feet. But when we got there, I believe they said, we can't do nothing with this. You know what I mean? It was a while ago, and I was so traumatized by that. It was like, okay, yeah, I'm working, but I'm just working through the motions, working through the steps to, because correctional officers and police officers, we're like robots. You just follow steps, you just follow protocol. Okay, well, we're going to take them to the doctor. But the whole time, I was in a daze myself. I was shocked myself because I was like, God damn, this man was so psychotic. Bless him. Bless him. He was so psychotic that he mutilated his own self. He took off 2 toes and was working on the 3rd. And he was pushing those toes up underneath the cell door. And I thought it was baby mice. You know what I mean? That's how much flesh he was able to pull off his toe. But that's the weird thing. And I said it. You see a lot of shit working in the prisons as a correctional officer. And I'm pretty sure as a police officer and firemen and paramedics. Baby, when we leave this career, we need to be debriefed. I am being debriefed. Debriefed by psychiatrists and therapists. That's my weird thing.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness. If you're at a dinner party and they insist on talking about additions to the home and their favorite new history podcast, interject with something like, I was looking into my partner's eyes today and I thought, oh shit, there's jelly in there. And then that bothered me all day long. And that's how you find your yes and people. He who can continue the joke can continue the relationship with me. Like I started one the other day with someone and I said, I think that if Roger Ebert was alive today, he'd be doing reviews of corporate steakhouses. And he was like, without missing a beat, oh yeah, I think he'd be doing TikTok lives, definitely. And he'd agree that Del Frisco's is the superior corporate steakhouse. Them's my people. Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
I have an ugly baby theory. Just stay with me because usually you don't see ugly babies. And I wondered why, so here we go. So, if you have 2 attractive people, they are your positive. So, it's like math. positive plus a positive equals a positive cute baby. Now, if you have two ugly people that get together to have a baby, it's like a negative and a negative. And math wise, like two negatives that cancels each other out, and that equals a positive. So then, still cute baby. But then if you have an attractive person and a quote unquote ugly person, you got a positive and a negative. That's going to be your negative, and therefore your ugly baby.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
All right. If you're thinking of investing in some big company, look up the CEO, read their bio. If they were born rich, like dad owned 27,000 New York City apartments, or an apartheid diamond mine, or a major shipping company, and then now they're the CEO of this, don't invest there long term. Don't invest there long term because they've put a figurehead in charge, and that person doesn't understand normal people's motivations, so that company won't do well in the market for pleasing customers, and it won't do well in keeping employees because people who grew up that rich don't understand normal people's motivations.
Say the weird thing.
This might sound crazy, but for the eclipse, I'm going to reiterate this. I don't think that it's the moon that's going in front of the sun, because this is for entertainment purposes only. Because the eclipse is going on right now, supposedly, right? And so I've been outside all day, and the sun is this round ball, moon's a round ball. Supposedly the sun and the moon are up there together right now. I don't think that the moon is what's going in front of the sun. I don't, because if the sun glows off, like, if the sun is what causes the moon to glow, like, the moon shining on the sun shining on the moon is what causes the moon to light up. Wouldn't I have watched it if it's heading its way to go and cross in front of the sun? Like, if the moon is really about to, like, maybe I won't see it while it's right over the sun because it's blocking the light, but today, wouldn't the moon have been shining? You would have been able to see glimpses of the moon about to cross it.
She's got a point.
Like, if the sun is what shines the moon, wouldn't we have been able to watch the moon make its way over to the sun? I mean, I see the moon in the daylight all the time.
Yep.
Why haven't we seen the moon make its way towards the sun if the sun is shining on the moon? They're both like balls, right? Balls of whatever they are, whatever. The balls, and like that one's light and that one shines from that one shining. When did we watch it come across the sky today? Like, when did we watch it make its way in front of the sun? I've seen the moon in the daylight. I mean, it's just going to randomly appear right here in front of the sun and block it out. I mean, we're not going to watch the moon like we do every single day. In like daylight, you can see the moon all the time, but we're not going to watch it come across the sky, go in front of the sun, and be able to watch it go back down. I mean, I see the moon in the day all the time. How come we not see it going across the sky, then covering the moon, and then going away from it? Why have we not seen the moon? I don't think the moon is what's blocking the sun. I know that's what science tells you, but I don't think that's what's really happening. I think the word NASA is to deceive, so in Hebrew.
Wake up to reality.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
There are a lot of hot girls out there who are truly fine, gorgeous in every way, that are single. And there are some of them who are looking to settle down, to have the stable home, the partner, the family, the whole vibe. They can't find it because they don't understand this simple thing. The type of men that do wife up, the type of men that do settle down, want to come home, want to commit, are not attracted to sexy women. They don't go for the sexy women. They are attracted to beauty. Don't get me wrong. They will look at a sexy woman and be like, wow, she's fine. But that's about it. They go for the cutesy, feminine girl in the sundress. They don't go for the girl who looks like she parties every weekend. And that's a fact. I have brothers, I have a fiance, and I have talked to men about this topic. That is something I get over and over. They will say, we go for the approachable woman. We go for the woman we are comfortable with taking home to mama. I am telling you, even in the workplace, If you are a beautiful woman, but you don't present yourself in a promiscuous way, you have like kind of like a down to earth cutesy vibe, I'm telling you, men will bend over backwards 10 times more for you than they would a sexy appearing woman. I'm telling you, feminine, like genuine, like down to earth cutesy femininity wins every time.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
I don't think that anyone ever actually wins the lottery, especially not those mega million big ass jackpots. I don't think that anyone actually wins that money. I think it's a very clever government scheme to have Americans throw billions, literal billions of dollars into a pot under the presupposition and the hope that maybe they have a very small chance of winning. And basically, all of us are throwing money into this pot with that little glimmer of hope in our eyes, and the government gets to pocket all of it. And they don't have to answer to anyone for any of it because we gave the money willingly for that little shot at $1 billion. And I think that one way to like really prove that is the fact that so many jackpots have gone up to $1 billion lately. I remember being a kid, they never got that high. Never ever. But all of a sudden, every few months, there is $1 billion jackpot, and Americans just start to throw even more money into this pot, and all of this money is accumulated, and then they say that some person in the middle of abso-fucking-lutely nowhere is the one that won. And the first thing that they tell anybody who wins is that they shouldn't tell anyone that they've won. So clearly there's no proof of who actually won the money. So that person may not even really exist, but on the off chance that they do, and they actually did win the money, half of their money is immediately gone to the government. That's $500 million that the government gets to take, and they don't have to account for any of it. And then take away from all of that the fact that it's completely a rigged computer system, okay? It's just a bunch of code inside of a computer that determines what the winning numbers are. It's not someone sitting there with the little bingo ball thing and rolling out and a ball comes and no, it's none of that. It's all computer generated. It's a computer generated system, which means that there's code. And if there's code, that means that someone is writing it. And so what makes you think that they wouldn't pick the most unlikely numbers to be the numbers that win that week, so that people will throw more money into the pot until it gets to a sizable enough amount, and then suddenly someone wins? I think there was a case of some guy, I believe his last name was Tipton, and he was a coder, and he rigged the system so that he could win, and he rigged the system so that family members of his could win. So we know that it's possible to do it, so why do we think that the government wouldn't do it, and that this isn't just a way for the government to collect massive amounts of money that they don't have to account for? Anyway, I'm really fun at parties.
Say the weird thing.
Everything we see is not actually the color that we see. In fact, it's the exact opposite, because the color that we see is the only color the object isn't keeping for itself. It's the only color that it's reflecting. So everything that we see is actually every color but the one that we see. So every red thing that we see is actually every other color but red. Isn't that concerning?
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
Cold and hot are not what you think they are. At least if you don't know a lot about this specific topic. Because when something gets cold, right, it's not that it gets cold, it's that it is less hot. Because cold isn't a thing. Getting hot is the thing. You make things warmer. And the act of making something colder is something taking the hot away. So like when you heat something up, when you excite it, the particles that make it up, they get all excited, they move around. You probably are familiar with that. But when something is being cooled, that means like if you blow cold air across something that's hot, the cold air is coming along and taking the heat away from the hotter object. You pour water on something and the water is cooler, the same thing. It will cool that thing down because the water is actively taking the heat away. In order to make something colder, you need something colder than the original thing to make it colder. Like your refrigerator. Go behind it and you'll notice it's really hot because the heat is being drawn away from the rest of the fridge. Because things aren't cold, they're just not hot. You take the hot away. Cold, to make the coldest thing ever, we can't, because we don't have anything colder than the coldest it can be to take the hot away.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
So, you know the myth that, like, when you're getting your cheeks clapped on a regular basis, that your rear end tends to be like fuller and look a little better. Well, there's actually some science behind that. So when that is something that is a regular part of your weekly regimen, you're stimulating your lymphatic system. So that constant movement, that basically what that's doing is, when you're in that state and that's happening, you're increasing blood flow, but you're also stimulating your lymphatic system, which is moving out old and stagnant lymphatic fluid, which smooths the skin and also promotes additional cell growth because you're stimulating blood flow in that area. So there is some truth to the fact that when you are regularly getting your cheeks clapped, your rear end tends to look bigger. It's because you're stimulating your lymphatic system and increasing blood flow to that area, therefore giving you a rounder and more plump behind. So yeah, stay safe, ladies, and have fun.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
Yo, the Arm& Hammer baking soda company, they had to have benefited from the crack era, right? Like, they had to have known that there are spikes in sales in Detroit, Baltimore, LA, New York. They have to have known. They had to have benefited from the crack era. Has anybody ever looked into that?
Say the weird thing.
Okay. Does anybody else wonder if our pets watch us change clothes, or they just see us wearing other clothes, and assuming they don't understand clothing, if they wonder why we routinely tear off bits of our fur and flesh only to replace it with different but similar looking and smelling fur and flesh? And furthermore, if the reason they freak out at bath time or when we're trying to brush them is because they are secretly worried that we're going to tear off their flesh and make them wear other similar but different fur and flesh? No? Just me? Yeah, that sounds about right.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
I'll say the weird thing. This is absolutely a tinfoil hat theory that I'm not even 100% convinced of myself. For a long time, I've been wondering if the overturning of Roe, the lack of free college, and the lack of free healthcare in this country is partially, at least, due to the fact that military enrollment is down a lot. We need more soldiers that come from a poor background, because the number one and number two draws of being in the military is good healthcare, good because the VA sucks, and free college, the GI Bill. There is almost no other benefits from being in the military as opposed to being in the private sector and just working.
Say the weird thing.
So when you're in a committed relationship with a woman, everybody sits there and says, you guys are a team. You play as a team. We had that interpretation wrong all these years, and I'll explain it. So as men, we're on the field, rain, sleet, or shine, the entire game, running the plays we are told, getting beat up in the process. We look to the sideline and see our coach holding a clipboard, communicating with everybody not in the game, criticizing the way we just did it, and the ways we can do it better moving forward. And in the event we do get it right, they get all the praise, but we both walk away with pretty rings.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
I got a good one. Hi, my name is Leah Elson, and I am a published scientist in my 15th year of human medical research and innovation. And today, I'm going to tell you the weird fact that about 50% of your genome is non-human in origin. Yes, that's right. So where's this genetic information coming from that's non-human? Well, it turns out that it's viral in nature. So the thing about viruses is that if you were to ask most scientists, they will tell you that they're not technically living organisms because they don't stack up to the criteria that are meant for living organisms, right? They can't metabolize, they don't react to stimuli, and most importantly, they cannot reproduce on their own. So how do they reproduce? Well, essentially, viruses attach to your cells, they inject their genetic information, and then they essentially hijack your cell and use it like a biological photocopier, making identical versions of itself over and over again until it bursts out of the cell with all of its babies and then infects other cells, other humans, etc. But sometimes when these viruses inject their genetic information, adjacent parts of the human DNA that it injected into are not able to actually replicate that section of DNA. And for whatever reason, that viral DNA gets buried inside of your genome. And then when you have children, and your children have children, and your children's 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 children have children, that DNA from viruses just gets passed down through the generations. And so 8% of your genome currently we know is attributable to ancient viruses, and another 40% seem to be nonsense, mal-coded, not really reading transcribable DNA, and we think that those may also be viral in origin as well. So look at you, walking around with a little hybrid genome. You little chimera, you.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
OJ didn't kill Nicole. His oldest son, Jason, did. Jason is now 53 years old. At the time of Nicole's death, he would have been 23. Jason went into the army, and when he got out, he was working as a sous chef. The night that Nicole died, he literally had an entire set of knives on him. That night, he never clocked out of work. In fact, they didn't even know where he went. His time was later written in. That night, he was supposed to cook for Nicole and her family, but at the last minute, Nicole changed her mind, and this enraged Jason. Why? Because Jason had rage issues, and he was taking Depakote to deal with it. Now, at the time Nicole was murdered, he had stopped taking his medicine. Now, before OJ met Nicole, he was with Marguerite, whom he had Jason, a daughter, and another child. And when Jason was a teenager, he was in charge of watching his youngest sister swim in the pool. When they came back, she had drowned. He was there. We do know he was let go of one job prior to the one he had for threatening a supervisor while yielding a knife. His former girlfriend stated that he threatened schmuicide and then stabbed himself. Jason lied about his whereabouts the night Nicole died, and he said he was with his girlfriend. It came up in the civil deposition that he was lying. He then later said that he went home after work and didn't do anything. So he never, ever, ever had an alibi as to where he was. When this line of questioning came up, Jason got very nervous, and the lawyer asked what was going on, and they immediately took a break. Now, when they came back from a break, this line of questioning was never revisited. Whoever killed Ron and Nicole would have been covered in blood. Remember, Ron put up a fight. Getting into a car would have certainly meant more than just a few drops of blood. Speaking of cars, we never got to see Jason's car, but we do know that his Jeep was left out for days in the rain with the top down. So the theory is that Jason went to Nicole's home to confront her about the dinner and saw Ron there and figured out what was going on, and in a fit of rage walked back to his Jeep, grabbed a knife, and killed them both. Now, the only person OJ would have taken the fall for was his son, who he felt he failed in life. So then why did OJ have a cut on his hand? These were the earlier days of cell phones, and at the time, police never did check his cell phone records. They later did and saw that there was a call that went out from Jason to OJ. So quite possibly, Jason called OJ and told him what he did. OJ went back to the house and in a fit of anger after seeing what his son did, slammed his hand down and cut it. It's quite possible that OJ then told Jason to go home and clean up, and OJ cleaned up himself. That night, OJ immediately called a lawyer for Jason. The next day, the only person in the first person to have a lawyer was Jason. Fact. When the cops showed up to the house, they wanted to press Jason, and they were immediately rebuffed, and their focus was to go entirely on OJ. Jason got away with murder, and OJ got away with tampering with a crime scene and accessory to murder at best.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
Roe versus Wade was not overturned to bring it back to the states, nor was it for religion, even though laws are based upon that. It's actually because America needs a new poor class, and we're not giving it to them. Right now, our birth rate is really low compared to decades, and we don't have enough people in our military that are wanting to join the military. And also, the poor class is not saying that, hey, I don't want to work at 7-Eleven the rest of my life. I want to actually do something. So they want to go get a higher education so they can make more money. And they're choosing to have a career over babies. So Roe v. Wade was overturned to force people to have children at a young age by whatever means necessary, basically. And they're going to enter into a new loop system. Their next tier is they're going to get rid of the education department, which they've been wanting to do for a long time. And I know why. They're going to say it's like for whatever dumb reason that it's poorly managed and they don't want to brainwash your kids, but it's because they want more dumb people that are less educated so that you stay poor. That's what my weird thing is.
Say the weird thing.
The reason your seasonal allergies are so bad is because of botanical sexism. When I first heard this term, I straight up thought that it was an SNL skit that was making fun of woke culture, but hear me out. My credentials are that I literally wrote a research paper on this in college, and anytime I had an assignment where I could pick what I wanted to do and I didn't really have that many parameters, I always picked this because nobody had ever heard of it, and it's just so interesting and weird. Biology 101, male trees produce pollen, female trees absorb pollen. And then once they absorb that pollen, they're fertilized. And then with that, they produce fruit and other byproducts. Okay, so we got that down. For the past 80 to 100 years, city planners have only planted male trees when they're doing new landscapes and stuff. And the reason for this, which is listed in this quote in the 1949 USDA Yearbook of Agriculture, is when used for street plantings, only male trees should be selected to avoid the nuisance from the seed. Basically, they thought that, if we just plant male trees and we don't have any female trees that have fruit and things like that, then we're not going to have the mess of all of the fruit that's fallen and rotting and things like that. But what they didn't take into account is that without any female trees, there's nothing there to absorb the pollen. And elevated levels of pollen in the air mean elevated levels of allergies. Don't look at my nails. The kicker in all of this is had they just reversed their practices and made it all female trees, there would have been no pollen to fertilize them anyways, so they would have had just as clean of streets without all the extra pollen in the air. So yeah, if you're dying of allergies right now, you can blame the city planners of the 1940s and 1950s.
Say the weird thing.
Okay, so the reason that fiber will lower your cholesterol, which by the way, fiber will lower your cholesterol like guaranteed. So the reason that fiber will lower your cholesterol is because when you eat fiber, you poo faster, and when you poo faster, your lower intestines, your large intestine, that's actually the short one, as it reaches your tushy hole, it absorbs bile, which cholesterol makes bile. Your body uses cholesterol to make bile. So the faster you poo, the less bile that you can absorb out of your poo before you poo it out. And so the more bile then you have to make, which then uses up the cholesterol in your body. So you're using your cholesterol to make bile because you're forcing yourself to poo faster, which is why fiber works to lower cholesterol. It's weird, but it's pretty cool. So if you have high cholesterol, don't worry about taking all of the, I mean, all of the stuff that the doctors give you, by all means, worry about taking it. I mean, like, you should take it. Like, it's good to take it. But at the same time, you can also, like, just do the Metamucil or, like, Fiber One bars or, like, those kinds of things. And, like, the extra fiber will help lower your cholesterol, or also eating, like, oatmeal and things. But probably the easiest solution is just, like, the orange-flavored Metamucil and chug that thing every morning, like, just like a beast, chug it, and poo a lot more. Yeah. Poop. Pooping more lowers your cholesterol.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
What if the Girl Scouts is actually just a cookie company that uses child labor to sell their products?
Say the weird thing.
Have you ever heard of the New Guinea worm? It's a terrible parasitic infection. It's a nematode, so it's a long, thin, spaghetti-like worm, and it comes from drinking contaminated water. This water has little water fleas in it, and the water fleas themselves are infected with the larvae of this worm. The human comes along and ingests it. You swallow the copepod. It then gets broken up by your digestive acids in your stomach, and then all the larvae are released. They then burrow through your stomach and out into your peritoneal spaces, where they mate. And the male then dies because he has fulfilled his life's duty, and the female, now fertilized, takes about a year to travel down your legs, all the while growing to be about 30 inches long, and then she causes these terrible, painful blisters to erupt around your feet and the bottoms and the bottoms of your legs. And those induce a burning sensation, which makes the host want to put their feet in water, so they do, and then the blisters break apart, and the female pokes her little head through, and she puts all of her larvae into the water, and the larvae infects more copepods, more humans drink the water, and the life cycle repeats. But this long female is just hanging out in this poor infected human's leg, and there's only one way to get rid of it. When she pokes her little head through, you gotta grab it. And you can't just yank, right? It's almost 3 feet long. And so you gotta take a stick, and you gotta wrap it around the stick, and you gotta slowly twist until it gets too tight. You don't want to break it, and so you then tape the stick to the person's leg, and you wait for the female to chill out, and then it comes out a little bit more, and then you wrap it some more, and you repeat this process over the course of weeks until you finally get the whole worm out. Anyway,
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
Some people believe we all go to either heaven or hell. And they also believe all babies go to heaven. And they also believe a fetus is a baby. So if a pregnancy is terminated, the baby will go to heaven. But they want to force them to be born so they have a chance to grow up shitty and go to hell. So pro-life people cause more people to go to hell. That's their logic, not mine.
Say the weird thing.
Sometimes I wonder if the reason why the United States soil is depleted in our agricultural reasons is because we put everybody into a casket and then into a vault when we bury them, so the breakdown of our bodies isn't nourishing the soil like it used to in like the 1800s when we just died and put people in the ground. Like, what if that's the problem? What if it's the dead? What if it's the dead?
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
How's this for saying the weird thing? My favorite unfun fact to bring up while in mixed company here in Washington State is the fact that we are about 50 to 75 years overdue for an absolutely mind-fucking-bendingly massive earthquake that in every other iteration of its existence has completely leveled the Pacific Northwest. See, about every 350 to like 500 years or so, the area just off the coast of Seattle, known as the Cascadia Subduction Zone, gets a little hyphy and releases anywhere from an 8.8 to a 10.2 magnitude earthquake. Granted, the 10.2 is a bit of an exaggeration, considering the largest we've ever recorded on Earth is like a 9.5, but there have been like suspicions that there was at least a 10.0 somewhere in Alaska about 300 years ago. But the thing you have to remember about that magnitude scale is that it is logarithmic, which means it builds on itself to basically make itself worse. And it's based on time, not shakiness. So that is to say that if a 7.9, which is the largest quake that has ever hit California, lasts for anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes, a 10.2 on that logarithmic scale could last up to 30 minutes. Just imagine what 30 minutes of shaking would do to the west coast of the United States. And not just the Pacific Northwest. About 7 out of 10 times that Cascadia goes off, it takes San Andreas with it. We're talking destruction on a literally fucking unprecedented scale. It will make Katrina look like fucking Babytown Frolics. And just like every other horrible fucking thing to befall the American public that has happened in the last 20, 30 years or so, we are doing nothing to prevent or predict it. Granted, there is no predicting or preventing earthquakes, but there are early warning systems, like the ones that exist in Japan and other nations on the Ring of Fire that are extremely advanced. Like in some parts of Japan with the really advanced monitoring, they can measure everything from like far off shaking to sea level drop and predict tsunamis and quakes to the point that they can tell surgeons to halt surgeries and open elevator doors on the next floor and instruct people to get to high ground and to brace for impact. We didn't even know the Cascadia subduction zone existed until the 1980s. Which means absolutely every single building that was built in the Pacific Northwest before like 1994 is not earthquake stable. The estimate by FEMA is that up to 70% of dams, schools, hospitals, and like military complexes would collapse following this earthquake. FEMA also estimates that up to a third of the people in the inundation zone, which in some places in this destruction path could be as far as 30 miles inland from the coast, are going to be too old, too disabled, or too injured by the earthquake to seek shelter and to get to higher ground when the tsunami comes. A tsunami, mind you, that could be up to 50 fucking feet in height in some places. So basically they estimate that at least a third of the people living on the coast right now are going to die. And that's a best case scenario. Worst case scenario, this fucker hits in like the middle of summer, like on Memorial Day or 4th of July weekend, when everyone from surrounding areas has flocked to the beaches in Oregon and Washington. Worst case scenario, it hits at night. Either way, in 2012 when interviewed, one of the heads of the Washington State Department of FEMA stated that if Cascadia were to go off in all of its glory and release the absolute like top tier of what it's capable of, that, quote, the operating assumption is that everything west of I-5 will be toast. Like body recovery efforts, and that's it. I'm lucky to live in what they call the Inland Empire, which means all I have to worry about is a much smaller, much more diluted earthquake completely leveling downtown because of all their fucking stupid unreinforced masonry buildings. And like having no food or water for several weeks and probably the Nazis in Idaho going apeshit. But absolutely all of that would be preferable to anything that is happening on the coast. Did I mention there's a 1 in 3 chance of it happening in the next like 10 years? The estimate used to be 1 in 10 in 50, but then about 8 months ago, the Cascadia subduction fault line out in the ocean started leaking what geologists call tectonic fluid, basically the lubricant on the inside of the fault line, which is an indication that shit in there is getting kind of tight. We've never seen this phenomenon before, except maybe right before really, really, really big subduction zone catastrophe earthquakes, like the 2011 Tohoku quake in Japan. So that sped up the timeline a little. The point is, you could not pay me in solid gold bars to ever go anywhere fucking near Seattle ever the fuck again. No part of the coastline of the Pacific Northwest is worth that risk. Call me fucking paranoid, but I'm too fat to run for high ground. I don't like earthquakes. But I do love telling all of these facts to the Seattle socialites who come to Spokane to flaunt their money, make us feel like shit, and then just watching their pupils get to be like the size of dinner plates, and the horror like really fucking set in. Good luck, bitch!
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
My inner dialogue is some of the most absolutely unhinged shit you've ever heard in your life. And it can go from deeply philosophical to complete gibberish to making noises no human being should or has ever made. And on the surface, I can look calm, cool, and collected, but inside, I have the leprechaun in the hood screaming, "Hither my hand, hither my hand." I don't know. I probably need to be institutionalized.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
The 90s boy band Boys to Men has a member of the group named Wanye Morris. He has 4 sons. They're all named Wanye. They're also now in a singing group, and the name of the group is One More. I know it, and now, so do you.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
So when our grandmothers were pregnant with our mothers' bodies developed, and the fetus that carried all the eggs that she'll ever have in her whole life was in the fetus body that was inside of our grandmas, meaning the egg that created you and the egg that created me were inside of our grandmas, which means our grandmas and all that they ate and everything that they experienced and all the trauma that they felt directly impacted us as little eggs in our mothers' bodies. And every time I think about this, I get really angry because we're directly affected by our matrilineal side. And why don't we live in a matriarchy? We're all directly affected by what women experience because we're literally in our grandmas.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
Look, could I talk to you about my research that showed that sometimes crows do the nasty with dead crows? Of course I could, but I've talked about that many times before, and I think it's time for something fresh. So should we talk about woodpeckers and the fact that they have these extraordinarily long tongues that wrap around the back of their skull? I mean, we could, but is that really weird or is it just interesting? I mean, it's pretty tempting to talk about the olive-tailed thrush that farts on earthworms to get them to move around so it can eat them. The problem with that one, though, is that we don't actually think that's true anymore. I know people put it in books, but there's no evidence. I just don't think there's any getting around the fact that the answer is their genitals, because even though only 3% of birds have penises, those that do are a wacky. They can be as long as the bird's body, come in horrifying corkscrew shapes, and don't even get me started on the vaginas that evolved in response to those penises. And even if they don't have penises, you could be like a cassowary where both the male and the female has this pseudo.
Say the weird thing.
Hello, I'm an amputee, and unless some crazy piece of technology happens, I will never grow back my own leg. However, I have the ability to get pregnant, which means I have the ability to grow somebody else's legs, and I can get pregnant many times. So in theory, I can actually grow an infinite amount of somebody else's legs, but I will never grow my own leg back.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
I don't understand what baking soda really is. I know it's a chemical, but like, what is it? Because in the context of making baked goods rise, that makes sense, baking soda. But you're telling me this magical dust is also mouthwash, deodorant, teeth whitener, fridge odor neutralizer, air freshener, apparently it's a whitening agent for my laundry, kitchen cleaner, carpet stain remover, pesticide remover for fruits and veggies, silverware polisher, scorched pot cleaner, oil and grease fire extinguisher, homemade weed killer. It can help treat heartburn and may soothe canker sores. It may improve exercise performance, and it may relieve itchy skin and sunburns and may slow the progression of chronic kidney disease. What is this stuff? It's gonna save the world.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
I wonder how many executioners are out there in the world who just genuinely want to unalive people, but they found a legal way to do it. And not even thinking about how we do executions now with like the lethal injection. Think about how we used to do executions. Think about how other countries do executions. And usually it's the same person that's doing it. For a normal person, taking someone's life normally like that would really fuck with their heads. Imagine if there's folks out there that genuinely just love taking the lives of other people. And so they found a way to be able to do what they love as a job? I feel like it's pretty likely. I mean, there's a lot of pedos out there that go into education strictly because they want to be surrounded by children. And in any other capacity, that would be fucking weird. It's fucked up to think about it that way. But considering how many female bodies get sexually assaulted in morgues because coroners are disgusting, some of which probably went into the position because that's exactly what they wanted to be able to do, I wouldn't put it past an executioner to try to do the same shit. Kind of the same shit.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
Okay, I'll play this game. I think it's about time that we all stop gaslighting ourselves into thinking that showering is anything but a chore. Listen, I've had 26 years to think about this, and I finally formed my opinion. Showering is a chore. I would put it in the same category as having to vacuum, having to dust, having to do the dishes, all those little tedious tasks that you hate to do, but like kind of have to. Now, TikTok, please don't twist my words and don't take this to mean I do not shower. I shower every single day. I hate it, but I do it. Now, I'm begging y'all not to drag my ass in the comments, please. I just need some people that feel the same. I just need to feel seen on this subject, and I'm really hoping that this video reaches that audience.
Say the weird thing.
Astronauts train with toilets on Earth to use the toilets in space. This is the training toilet that astronauts use to train to use the restroom on the space shuttle. So they didn't actually use this on Earth, but there was a camera inside which they used to check their alignment. Because poop floats in space. Everything floats in space, but importantly, poop. And so everything has to be lined up right, because if you do miss, you have to retrieve what was supposed to be in the toilet, which has happened. And then all that waste is usually loaded up with other garbage and then thrown at Earth and burns up in Earth's atmosphere, which looks like this, a shooting star. I've said it before, some shooting stars are just astronaut poop. We also drink recycled urine and sweat on the ISS. It's a very efficient process.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
The government will allow you to write a prescription for a symptom without doing a blood test to find the source of the issue. Medical doctors are financially incentivized to write prescriptions for said symptoms. Most of the studies you see on the efficacy of these pharmaceutical drugs published in the National Journal of Medicine are funded by the pharmaceutical companies. Doctors will tell you alternative medicine does not work, despite 80% of doctors admitting that they have not been educated in the matter. Alternative medicine was a phrase coined in the 1990s to describe Ayurvedic practices, as opposed to it just being called medicine prior. Mind you, I personally believe that alternative medicine and conventional medicine can live synergistically. I still believe that there is a need for medical professionals and pharmaceutical medications in life-saving situations, but we must start treating the source and not just symptoms.
Say the weird thing.
Alright, it's weird, but you told me to, so I gotta do it. Do you ever go shopping and you bring home new clothes? I'll admit, okay, listen, I don't wash all my new clothes when I bring them home before I put them in my closet, whatever. So let's say I have a shirt or a pair of pants or something, and I hang them up on the hanger and put them in my closet. I'll always imagine, as I'm hanging them up, my new clothes, they touch my old clothes that are in the closet. And my old clothes, like the particles and stuff in there, are like introducing themselves to the particles and stuff in my new clothes. And they're all like, yo, what's up? Welcome to the fam. You know, your owner is going to be great. She treats you great. You know, she takes baths and she doesn't like mistreat her clothes. I don't know, but I imagine that. I do that with a lot of things.
Say the weird thing.
Okay. Do you ever brush your hair and then you see a few pieces come out, or you're outside and you touch your head or your hair and a couple pieces come out? Do you ever think that maybe one of them will fly off into the wind and it'll land in a crime scene, and then you'll be convicted of a murder you didn't commit? Because sometimes I think about that.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
I have one. I have one for this. So the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, there's a supercomputer called Deep Thought. And Deep Thought was given the question, what's the meaning to life and everything? And you know what they popped out with? 42. 42. And people were confused by this. They were like, what the hell? So what had happened was there was this... you have to remember that it is a computer program. So in computer programming, the spot number 42 is designated for the asterisk. And the asterisk is, in computer terms, anything you want it to be. So this massive supercomputer, Deep Thought, in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy said that the meaning of life is whatever you want it to be. I hope you guys are having a great day. And if you like this type of content, please hit that follow button, because I do nerdy stuff all the time. All right, you guys have a great day. Bye.
Say the weird thing.
So there's 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day, 365 days in a year. You know what the average life expectancy for a male in the United States is according to CDC? 73.3 years. Out of all that time spent on Earth, do you know when he gets the most praise of being a good individual, a good father, a loving husband actually happens to be? When he lies in a pine box surrounded by his family and friends, worshiping the ground he walks on when he can't even hear him. So a recent study was done where they sampled multiple funeral home directors and they all came out with the same comparative analysis. Average time span of eulogy given is roughly 3 to 7 minutes. We'll call it 5 on average. Total time of all the eulogies combined given, 45 minutes. 45 minutes divided by 5 minutes is 9 individuals praising one individual for 73.3 years of life. So if you plan on being one of those individuals that stands up in front of the crowd for the 5 minutes, the 9 of you, speaking praises about an individual that you loved and you cherished so much, and their loss is hitting you hard. How many times you miss the opportunity to tell your dad, your brother, your significant other, any male in your life, that what they did didn't go unnoticed, that you appreciate their existence. The weird thing that I'm saying is, this even has to be talked about.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
If I don't finish a bottle of antibiotics and I put it in my medicine chest, I think, what if after the rapture, when all of the tribulation saints are running from the Antichrist and people with the mark of the beast, they run across this in the ruins of my household and somebody needs this antibiotic. I feel better for not taking all of it.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
The people in this country who have read the Bible the most and treat others the way Jesus would, the most Christian people in this country, are atheists.
Say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness.
Nobody's saying the weird thing yet. The weird thing is that NPCs are real, and I think I figured out how to find out who they are. Next time you're on a phone call with somebody, don't hang up at the end of the conversation. Just say bye, love you, whatever, right? And just sit there in silence. And watch how many people you know that just expect that you're the one who hung up, and they either put their phone down or they put their phone in their pocket. Meanwhile, you're still on the line, and they carry on about their day. Then something weird's going to happen eventually if you try this enough. You're going to sit there in silence for like 10 seconds. And then the other person's going to say, "Are you still there?" Who the fuck is just waiting there silently? Why don't these people end the call? Why don't they confirm the call? Who is out here living like Larry on these fucking phone calls?